So, in this second part of this trio of videos, we're going to talk about Sony and Microsoft as first-party console manufacturers slash developers, how them making games should actually be cheaper than, say, than third parties. So, without further ado, let's get down into the nitty-gritty. So, it's time to unleash a pummeling of fury. I'm joking. I'm not a violent person, except in Smash Brothers, and Splatoon, and in my tabletop RPG games, and in most of the games I play. Never mind, I am sort of a violent person, but not in real life. But let's get into it. Let's look at Microsoft first, because they're the juggernaut compared to Sony's rather anemic first-party lineup of studios right now. Microsoft has some decent studios under their belt, making games for them. 343, the people that are making Gears of War, the Forza team, the remnants of Lionhead, Rare, Ensemble Studios, the people who made Age of Empires. The important thing to realize about all of these studios is that they all basically have their own engines that they use to make the games, because they work exclusively on said hardware or software. For Ensemble Studios, PC games, so software, and it's all basically based on the Windows OS and DirectX and all that type of stuff. They have an intimate understanding of the stuff, so making games for them should be easy and relatively inexpensive. I mean, if I work on a chicken farm, chicken is free on my dinner table, or it should be. That's what the logic should be, right? Now, that's generally how it goes. When they budget a game to be made, it should be cheaper to make with more extravagances that are cheap to use, if not free, because it's in-house, right? So that should be the case. Now, there may occasionally be instances where they want to use outside sources. For example, looking at Gigantic Gigantic and A Pirate's Tale. Those two games look like they're using a more advanced version of the Project Spark game creator. So basically, what you're seeing is, for all intents and purposes, you're seeing a very budget, in-house budget game asset creator. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, personally speaking, if you are a good enough developer, you can take a budget title and make anything you want to out of it. You can take low res, you can take low monetary, you can take low valued assets and make a great game, because that is the awesome thing about game creation, is that you're only limited by your creativity. Like, people think, well, developers need, all the bells and whistles. But really, all developers really need is their imagination and the skill to express it, and boom, they can make awesome games out of pixels, which they've done in the past. We're seeing a resurgence of the pixel style art form, and that's very low asset, very cheap to use, but still freaking awesome, so who's to say? Next, we'll move on to Sony, because they deserve their own specific type of thing, because Sony's a little bit different from everyone else. After the cut. Now we're getting into a kind of interesting area. We have Sony. Now, the issue with Sony, why their games last gen were so expensive is because they had to use the cell processor, which meant that they had to use a certain amount of in-house assets in order to make the games run well and smoothly. So even if they knew the hardware, they still were using premium assets in order to make the games. So it still was expensive to develop for, even in-house. And that's why Sony lost a lot of money last gen. Now they've moved on to a more PC-friendly architecture. So basically the development PCs that they're using, they can just port things over and then lower the specs and put it onto the console. This still is kind of expensive because they kind of have they still have to make the games look nice, and so it becomes an issue of how much do we spend, how much do we budget to allocate for these games, and how much are we going to make back in revenue, and can our budget stay under control so that the revenue is higher than our expenses and we make a profit. Thus far, it's been working out for them, barely, but all it would take is 2 or 3 flops, and that kind of wipes it out. Overall, the PlayStation division still owes the rest of the company billions of dollars, so with the minuscule amounts of money that they're making in the PlayStation division as of right now, it's still not looking too good for Sony. But it shouldn't be that way because, like I said for Microsoft earlier, you have developers who know the hardware, know the limitations and the strengths of the hardware, and they should be able to just craft games very well. Basically, at this point for Sony, it's going to boil down to basically making games that stay on budget and sell well. Now, the key word in that phrase, or key phrase in that statement, is sell well, because traditionally Sony first-party IPs don't sell too well. They haven't since the PS2 era, so I mean, I don't know. It could work out well, it could not. The conclusion after the cut. Okay then, it's time to talk about our next great adventure. The next video after this one will be focusing on Nintendo. So yeah, shit's about to get real, son. No, I'm joking. We'll be talking about Nintendo. And Nintendo is how they make their games is very different from Sony, Microsoft. Well, it's different in how they put their games out and how they make their games in a way, but it's different. It's different. It's very, very different from the other companies. So with that being said, let's stay tuned for the next for the third and final part of this trio of videos in detailing or giving an overview of how the video game business really works. Stay tuned for part 3, coming soon.